Welcome back to the Single Parents Network podcast with Coach Enrgy. I am the Single Parents Coach, where I work with single fathers, single mothers, and those who date single parents. This podcast is where I will share valuable content on all matters of the heart and various life issues that single parents tend to face, such as communicating effectively, co-parenting, dating, relationships, marriages, divorces, you name it. And on this week's podcast, I have my guest, JP. He is here to discuss everything involving co-parenting and how to get to a healthy place. JP, welcome to the Single Parents Podcast. Thank you so much for being willing to share your information and your experiences with our listeners today. And please take a moment to introduce yourself and kind of let our guests know what's your connection with the topics of co-parenting that we will be discussing today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited. I am a 41-year-old single father to a 9-year-old girl, right? And her mother, I became a single father right after she turned 2. And so for the last 7 years, it's been a co-parenting relationship. The beginning stages, like anything else, you know what I mean? And if you go through divorce, we weren't married, so it wasn't a court institutionalized, long drawn out process to go our separate ways. You know what I mean? It was just, it didn't work out. We can split up, go our separate ways, and then start to figure out how to essentially raise the best child that we can raise from 2 separate houses. And you know, in the beginning, sure, there was a lot of conflict. Mostly I could say that, you know, I have a pretty strong knowledge of co-parenting and the hurdles and how to get through it. And I help people get through it, but you know, mostly my credibility lands on whatever mistakes that you think you could make as a co-parent. I mean, I probably made them at least once, probably twice. And now, and it was like that for probably 2 years. And then the last 7 years have been a lot more collaboration, you know, and as each year, you know, sort of like interest with your retirement or anything else, you know, the compounding year after year, it just gets easier and easier, and it gets a little bit, you know, just kind of autopilot. You know, we are in constant contact with anything that has to do with our daughter. You know, my daughter comes and goes as she pleases, but if she's grounded there, she's grounded here. She can't watch TV there. She can't watch TV here. We're on the same page. There's no pitting against each other, but also it's no big deal. You know, we sit with each other at the sports stuff. We sit with each other at the school stuff. You know, the parent-teacher conferences, we go together. Now, my daughter is in a blended family now over the last, you know, three and a half years. And so it's not just my daughter's mother that I'm co-parenting with. I'm also co-parenting with her partner. And then essentially his ex-wife on top of that, because there's his son, my daughter that are in the household with my ex, him, obviously, you know, his ex comes into play from time to time as well, which, you know, it's not a big deal to all be barbecuing in the summertime, and it's not a big deal to all be at the lake, and it's not a big deal to all go and support the kids. You know, obviously when it's his son's football games and stuff like that, it's a little less important that I'm there because I'm really out of the equation. And at my daughter's soccer games or dance recitals, it's less of a difference if his ex-wife is there. But outside of that, the holidays and these things and those things, it's no big deal for everybody to be around each other. But the relationship that I have or that I'm in with all of this, to me, has always seemed like that should be the standard or the normal. You know what I mean? I constantly get the reaction of, oh, I wish I was in that kind of a relationship. I wish my ex and I could be like that, or I wish you know what I mean? Whereas it's so much more socially accepted, normal, however you want to say it, for the parents to be at each other's throats and constantly be triggering each other and throwing gas on the fire. And because you know how to push your ex's buttons. I mean, you were in a relationship, you were married, you had a child. You know what's going to cause a reaction, or get the reaction that you want, or push the buttons, and you know what's going to trigger them, and you know what to say to make them, freak out on pick up and drop off days and all these different things. And there's, through my trials and tribulations, and then hearing remarkably similar stories minus specific details of all of these other people going through the same kind of thing, there's just a couple hurdles that once you can get through them, then it becomes a lot easier to just be in peace. And that's kind of what everybody's wants, when you start talking about mindsets and reframing and those kinds of things. Nobody's, when it's laid out as more of a choice, would you rather hold animosity or anger or whatever towards your ex, or would you rather pay more attention to your child? And everybody's going to say their child, but more times than not, whatever they're holding on to with their feelings for their ex is taking up that headspace or taking up that time and effort and energy. And so, but consciously, a lot of people probably don't even realize that that's the choice that they're making on a daily basis. And so that, that's kind of a rundown of my story, I guess. I'm in a place that most people wish they could be in.
Yes. And let's go ahead and go straight into the mindset and the reframing, since we're in this part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a perfect connection with what you just said. People say, man, I wish I had that. I wish I could be in that
Mm-hmm.
type of place with my ex. And you can be.
Right.
We all can be. And it's a choice. You mentioned that as well a
Mm-hmm.
few moments ago. It's literally a choice. Do you want to hold on to the anger? Do you want to hold on to the resentment? Do you want to hold on to the animosity with your ex versus saying, you know what? Let me put all of that energy, that attention, that effort, that time into my child or our
Right.
child. And so go ahead, let's talk about the mindset and the reframing.
Mm-hmm.
What can you share whenever you are helping people?
I usually, like, the first thing I tell people, and it's probably the most important thing, to be on the right road or hiking trail to get, the right path, and the very first thing you got to do is you got to leave your own pity party, right? The relationship failed. It is what it is. Just like any relationship that fails, or any sort of relationship that you don't get to have anymore. If you think about it in terms of a family member or a grandparent or a friend, when somebody passes away, you grieve them, right? Now, same with a relationship. So when you leave that pity party and you grieve that relationship, the relationship's gone. So holding on to anger or shame or resentment, animosity, betrayal, whatever the emotional baggage and trauma that you're carrying with you, once you can get out of your own way and say, and get through the relationship ending, Now, it's not easy. I'm not going to say that. And it's not quick. But the sooner that you can just look at that person as the father or mother of your child and allow that person to just be as that person, then you can start moving forward trying to raise your child the best between the two of you. But if you're holding on to the past, you're not moving towards a future. And so that's usually the biggest hurdle, you know, because a lot of people don't want to, you know, if you do a lot of work on yourself, you know, you'll come across a certain phrase that a lot of people struggle with, but you need to forgive them, let go of that relationship for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, you don't forgive other people necessarily to forgive them, but once you've let go and forgive them and forgive the situation and let yourself take a deep breath and a step back and know that it's over, only then are you going to be able to move forward. Because you can't be stuck in the past and walk forward. You know, you're just carrying a bunch of baggage. And, you know, if you can't grieve that relationship, let that relationship go and let go of the trauma and the baggage. Every relationship that you get into moving forward also is going to be handcuffed by the baggage that you're not wanting to deal with. And so you're going to be stuck in sort of a limbo until you can jump that hurdle, until you can sort of get through that. That's probably most of the reframing and the mindset that you kind of got to start realizing as far as you know, because it's going to handcuff you, hold you back no matter what until you deal with it. Same as any other trauma or any baggage that you're dealing with.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that, part of being able to let go and move on and just let your ex just be, part of it is taking accountability for your part in the mess, your part in the situation. Because I've seen too often where a lot of people will see the blame in the other person. And it's like, well, they did this and they shouldn't have done this, or because they did this, I did that. And they don't realize that they're letting go of all of the power and the control that they have for that situation, that relationship, because you can't control or do anything about the other person and the other person's actions. You have
Right.
no control over that. But what you can control and what you can do something about is your actions, the things that you may have done, the things that you may have said, or how you may have responded or reacted in response to what the other person may have done, even if they initiated it.
Right.
You still have some sort of responsibility, and you have to take accountability for your part in that conversation going back, or the relationship itself and
Right.
everything that was involved in it. So taking accountability is a huge part of the mindset and the reframing and being able to grieve properly. And to be able to really take accountability, it's all about self-awareness. Like, you have to look internal, look within yourself, and really just say, okay, I may not, this may not be a positive or not positive. This may not be a fun or an easy or a light question to ask myself, but what did I do? What part did
Right.
I play in this situation? What part did I play in that particular conversation on that day that ruined the rest of the night for everybody, that ruined the event for everyone? Really looking at self is where the forgiveness also starts to take place. Because you mentioned that being very important, Forgiveness
Right.
is not for the other person, it's for you. And in order to be able
Right.
to move on, in order to be able to move forward, in order to be able to move on without grabbing and taking or dragging those emotional baggage
Hmm.
with you from the current relationship to the next, or even the next few relationships, you have to learn how to forgive, because holding on to that hurt, that betrayal, the anger, the animosity, you said that earlier, holding on to
Hmm.
that is not, it's not healthy, and it's not effective, and it's not productive. It's not going to help with growth, and it's not going to help with being able to move forward in peace.
Right. Right. And, it's once, and then, once you can sort of, once you get into that, and you start seeing things a little more objectively, and you start getting out of your own way, and you when you start going through that, you'll notice that your emotional triggers start to deplete, right? Because when you can reframe the relationship as this is not my partner in life, but it is still my partner raising the best children or child that we can, be on the same page, be a united front, and all of these different things. Once you can start doing that, then the other hurdle is I'm constantly having to help people reframe or change the way that they're looking at engaging in negative behaviors.
Mm.
Addressing, don't engage. It's never, whether you're reacting or initiating whatever triggers, or poking, prodding. Essentially, you got two people with a gas can, and they're both throwing it on the fire, and it nobody wins. You know what I mean, on either side. But when you get into these, the tit for tat kind of mentality of, most of the time somebody will, well, this and this and this, and then this was my reaction, and then this was their reaction, and then when you start going through it with people, you're like, well, what what outcome were you hoping for? What was the benefit? Like, who benefited from this? So on your weekend, you spent the entire day fighting with the other parent back and forth on the phone, instead of taking your kids to the park, or taking them to watch their friend's hockey game, or coloring with them, sitting on watching TV with them. It doesn't really matter. You were so engaged in, how can I hurt that other person, or go the back and forth, whatever it was, that you're not in the present. You're not in the moment. You're not being good. You're not doing anything good. You're not being productive. You're not there for your kids. You're not being present. You are distracted, fighting over things that probably don't even matter, because you're still feeling hurt, or you still have, resentment to that other person. And some of the things are some of the things get somewhat petty too, and once you can, you know, the saying, be the change, the less you react and engage with unhealthy behaviors, or in these sort of things, somebody who's looking for a reaction will stop looking for a reaction that they're not getting.
Mm-hmm.
So if they know that they can trigger you, and then turn it around and they're the victim, even knowing they were the one pushing your buttons, if you quit reacting, if you have a high conflict ex partner, and every time you do drop off and pick up, they make it a point to have a yelling match in the parking lot of the park, or the store, or McDonald's, or wherever, however you guys, whoever is doing it, whatever your routine is, you know, if they feel like they should have a screaming match so that they can have a breakdown and start crying in the middle of the school parking lot because your drop off and pick up is after school one day, or whatever, there's nothing saying you have to sit there and feed into that. You just get in your car and leave. You don't have to engage in these outside behaviors. And the less that you engage or initiate them, the less that they're going to happen, because they're not getting the reaction that they're looking for. But also with that, you have to, as you go along, because this was my big hurdle, like in my journey. And it was me, and it was the way I perceived reality at the time. You know, my daughter's mother would send me a text asking what time I was going to pick her up, or on a weekday. And anytime that I saw that I had got, like, that she was asking me questions like that, I would instantly get defensive, because I would instantly get triggered because of my own BS that I hadn't dealt with and worked through. And then I would say something that would trigger her. And then it would just go back and forth until it escalated into this huge fight. And that was, you know, once a week, twice a week or more. And then once I realized that I was the problem and could take a good look at what I was doing and my behaviors, then the less I did it, the less it happened. But then also the less that, even if she was having a bad day and tried to push my buttons, if I didn't engage, little by little, it went away, because she wasn't getting the reaction that she wanted. But, you know, along with that, there's a lot of different scenarios that kind of go into the engagement kind of deal. You know, your children are your children. They're not your therapist. They're not your friend. They're not your person to vent to about the other parent, right? Let your kids have a loving father and a loving mother, and that's all that they need to know, right? If you bash the other parent with your kids around all the time, they're going to start thinking that they're not allowed to say that they love their mom at dad's house, and they're not allowed to love their dad when they're at mom's house. And then they become, you know, there's going to be, I'm fearful, you know, that in 15, 20 years, I mean, think about the identity crisis that's going to happen with these kids that are being raised by two separate places, where they have to pretend to be two separate people. And neither one of those people is really them at their core. So now they're split into three separate people trying to appease and be in the middle, used as a weapon, used as a spy, used as a, you know, toxic waste dump of all the emotions from each parent, because they're getting dumped on by all these emotions or all these problems, like they're the therapist, or like they're the friend or whatever, you know. So, you know, the engagement goes into more than just the other person and you know, pushing buttons and those kinds of things, because your children are there to be children. Right? If you need somebody to talk to, get a therapist, get a mentor, get a coach, join a support group, join a Facebook group. If you have issues that you need advice on, I'm going to tell you that you are better off and better served to find people to get advice from that are not part of your inner circle, right? And so, like, I know that you probably deal with this a lot, and I deal with this a lot. Like, I am an objective outlook. I'm not a part of the group of friends when you got divorced that is on your side, that's going to tell you you do nothing wrong, you're perfect, it's all them, they're the ones doing all this, it's all their fault. So try to find somebody who can give you an objective viewpoint on, you know, and if it's specific scenarios that you need to run by somebody, running them by your best friend since middle school is not going to, I mean, it's not going to be the best advice, because they're going to be on your side. Obviously it's all her, right? Or all him. And so, you know, learning to navigate and engage the way that shows your children this is how responsible adults in a responsible society interact and engage and talk to each other, right? And all little details and this and that kind of change, but for the most part, it relates to everybody. You can't take the frustrations of the other parent out, maybe not on your kids, but if my mom came over to visit and was around, I'm not going to sit there and bash my daughter's mom, while we're all sitting there eating dinner together. You know what I mean? Like, if there's something like I need advice on, you don't do it with your kids around, because you're showing them that either one, they should feel bad because they still love their mom, even knowing that you're having problems communicating or interacting with their mom. But you know what I mean? It's just a slippery slope.
Definitely. And our kids, period, they're not equipped to handle the issues that we as the adults create.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not equipped from a mental standpoint. Emotionally, they're not equipped. Physically, they're not able to handle the stress that the weight that it puts on our
Mm-hmm.
physical bodies and on their physical bodies. And I don't think enough parents consider that. I don't think enough parents take that into consideration, of the fact that kids are just not developed enough yet to be able to handle all of that. Plus school, plus friends, plus homework, plus, like you said earlier, the identity issue of needing to,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out, what do they do? Why does this happen this way? Why does their body feel, this way in the morning when they're trying to figure out so much stuff that just
Right.
comes with being a natural human being, just life itself. And they are not equipped to add on the weight and the issues that the parents bring in their environment and in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what causes a lot of childhood trauma that
Right.
adults still are walking around with dealing or are having to deal with.
Right.
And
Right.
adults, a lot of adults now who are needing to seek therapy and counselors and coaches, a lot of it unfortunately stems from their household environment that they grew up in and they had no control over. They were a small voice and they couldn't do anything or say anything to make a change or make a difference or create the peace. And it's just a cycle that keeps going
Right.
and going.
Right.
And where those adults, not all, but some, end up doing the same type of stuff when
Right.
they have kids. And
Right.
then now they're kids, so.
Well, generational curses, yeah.
Yeah.
And they are dangerous. You know what I mean? And being aware of some of these mindsets that are passed down from parent to child, parent to child, parent to child, because every family has the good, the bad, and just in the middle of different traditions and different things and different thought processes and ideals and stuff like that. The way that I choose to raise my daughter is drastically different than the generational curses that I'm in the midst of breaking, because I was raised, and it was a lot of, I had to become aware and I had to deal with the trauma and I had to deal with the baggage and trauma from my childhood. But when I became aware of it, and then when I became a father, I was aware enough that I didn't want this kind of thing to continue. You know what I mean? I was I was raised in a very emotionally disconnected household. And so there was no positive reinforcements for good accolades and stuff like that. You know, if you got really good grades, it was like, yeah, yeah. But it wasn't necessarily a loving home, but it wasn't like an abusive place or anything like that. But it wasn't a place where anybody really said, I love you or anything like that. But if you got into trouble, then everybody took notice. And that's when, you know what I mean? There was attention given. So I've been breaking that. You know, I'm more involved. I'm less emotionally detached from my daughter than probably my parents were from them. But it took me a very long time to understand that, you know, my parents did the best they could with the tools that they had, right? Same as anybody else. You do what you know, because if that's all you know, that's all you know. If you want to be different or raise your children different or have a different environment for your children or even for yourself, you know, at 30 years old and up to now, because of changes I made with my own personal outlook and the way that my mind works and the way that my reality is set and my interpretation of everything around me, my household is much different than the household I was raised in, but it's because I added more tools to my toolbox and expanded the way that I live rather than be confounded by the way that I was raised. And so once you can start doing that, you can pick and choose the good and the bad from your childhood. Now, that's not to say that, you know, my idea of success is if my daughter turns out to be a better human being than I am, you know, more compassionate, more confident, more giving, has easier, happier life with less trauma and less baggage from her childhood. I am fully aware of the fact that even knowing that I am doing my best and she knows that she's loved and all of these things, that she's still going to have some trauma, some baggage, because you can say something jokingly, and if they're in the wrong mental space at that moment in time, it could really affect them for the rest of their lives. And it's just the way it is. But if I can raise her to have the least amount of trauma that she needs to work through when she's in her early 20s, then I'll have succeeded. If she, you know, has a happier life than I had naturally, you know what I mean? Like I stumbled and tripped and self-sabotaged and numbed myself for much of my 20s. And that's, you know, not something I want her to go through. But if she doesn't have to, because I've become aware and broke these generational curses and these sorts of things, then I succeeded.
Yes. And one of the things that, speaking of the same thing that you're talking about, how it's you're different compared to what you experienced with your parents, and you're aware of that, and so you decided to make some changes and implement things differently. In regards to that, that is because you were willing to do the work. You were willing to face the ugly parts.
Right.
You were willing
Right.
to
Right.
feel the pain or the embarrassment of having to look inward. And
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of parents, and especially older generation parents, they avoid it, and it's unfortunate. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then, you know, there's a lot of time, you know, I try to, you know, there's a couple generational things, you know, like my parents, we couldn't really go to my parents for advice or to have certain kinds of conversations. So then it was just trying to figure it out on your own because, you know, my parents weren't good at difficult conversations or anything that had to do with, you know, emotions or anything like that. And so I try to be different with that in regards to my daughter. And I try to, you know, make sure she knows that she can come and talk to me about anything. And she's not a teenager yet. And, you know, some of these things are going to change, and I kind of have to roll with the punches. But you know, she's not going to be judged. I'm not going to look down on her. I'm not going to belittle her or make her feel like she can't. To safeguard my own level of comfort, stay in this comfort zone that out of sight, out of mind. I just don't want to, you know, go there. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes we just have to face it. How do they say it? You got to face the music. Sometimes you just
Mm-hmm.
have to face the music. It's okay. It is for the best, and you will thank yourself when you do, because you are able to release what you need to release as well, for not only just for yourself but for others, those who are in your household and those who you may end up interacting with as well. Yeah, so I this would be a good time to talk about going from fighting and arguing to collaborating. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about that. What can you share, for those who are ready to take that
Right.
transition from fighting to collaborating?
Uh, you know, one of the big things that trips people up, or you know, once you can get to certain spots and you're sort of, you're out of the relationship phase of it, you're out of the, you know, some of those things, and the, you know, the bickering back and forth and the unnecessary engaging, and those things get less and less. Then, you know, communication and boundaries are like probably one of the bigger things. Now, when you're still doing you know, the button pushing and the back and forth, or you still have a lot of like really strong emotional ties, it's harder to have boundaries and set boundaries, because you know, if the other person's still mad at you, they're going to cross your boundaries just to get that reaction from you. And there's a tricky, you know, you can have certain, I mean, obviously always have boundaries and know what your boundaries are and communicate your boundaries to other people. Now, having your boundaries disregarded or them overstepping boundaries as time goes on and maturity and growth happens, they'll be respected more and more, little by little, you know. But, you know, with the boundaries and the communication, you have to have already been able to really take a hard look at yourself in the mirror and understand that you're not perfect. So you can't hold them to a standard that you're not holding for yourself. You know what I mean? You can't have double standards. If you don't want them driving by your house when you don't have the kids, don't be driving by their house when they don't have the kids to see who's parked in their driveway. Like these kinds of things are things that really will trip you up if you're trying to move forward co-parenting. If you don't want them stalking you on Facebook, don't stalk them on Facebook. If you are allowed to go out when you don't have the kids, they're allowed to go out when they don't have the kids. There are a couple things that my daughter's mother and I had set, you know, which were even boundaries that end up being a couple of, you know, and when we did it, it was almost inadvertently, you know what I mean? Like we had agreed on a couple of things. One being, if I started dating somebody or if she started dating somebody and it started getting to a point where they were going to meet our daughter, we, the other parent, got to meet that person first. So there was never a point in time where my daughter went home with mom, came back to me the next time and said, mom's new boyfriend is living with us. And she's never came to me and went back home to mom and told mom dad's new girlfriend's living at dad's house. And my ex had no idea that I was even dating this person. And now all of a sudden there's somebody around my child. that is going to blow up in your face every single time. So if you can set these boundaries with each other in stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like the other person is going to start dating at some point. You're going to be dating at some point. That's normal. It is okay to have an emotional response the first couple, maybe 1 or 2, 3 times that they start dating somebody, you know what I mean? Like, it may not be easy for you to see them with somebody else for a while until it's something that is just second nature. You know, like after a while, once you grieve the relationship and do some work, it gets easier. But when you drop a bomb on somebody like that, it's going to explode, you know? Like, no man is going to be comfortable. Like, I have a daughter. If we wouldn't have had some sort of a deal in place like that, and my daughter came home to me and said, "Mom's new boyfriend's living at the house," like I'm not comfortable with that. You know what I mean? At least, you know. But having that in place to where that was never going to be a bomb that got dropped, it was never going to be a surprise on one side or the other. Like, we got to know, or at least get a feel for the person. You know what I mean? One of the other things that we had agreed on, and, you know, this is a boundary, double standard, and you can throw in, like, don't judge, you know, like, try not to judge the other person for things that really don't matter. You know what I mean? So one of the other deals that we had made early on was if her mom has her for the weekend, or if I had her, or if I, you know, no matter which way it was, we got first phone call. Meaning, if I'm sitting there and it's my weekend and somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, I got an extra ticket for this concert," whatever the case may be. Before I'd call a babysitter or a family member or anybody else, I would call her mother, and vice versa, same way the other way. That worked really well because it gave, you know, not that they had to drop everything that they were doing, but, you know, with that though, you can't pick a fight and judge them and start throwing allegations at them. Or, well, I guess next time it's your weekend, maybe you just won't have them because you don't want to be a parent, and whatever other stupid, childish, immature, mean girl, you know, locker room bullying type mentality, abusive behaviors that you want to throw into that. These work because we didn't do that. You know what I mean? If her mom called me up and said, "Hey, there's a bunch of girls that are going out. Are you busy tonight?" They want me to go, bingo, whatever the case may be. We're going to the casino. I mean, it doesn't matter. I didn't try to pick fights, poke at her, get a reaction out of her, call her a bad mom, or any of those things, because she's allowed to have a life, same as me. But we were both adults enough to be able to make these arrangements without it coming back to bite us later on. You know what I mean? Something came up. I didn't have anything going. Her mom called me. Yeah. You know, you drop her off, I'll come get her, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, and to me, even at the point, like, I didn't even care what she was going to do. You know what I mean? You can do whatever you want. You're an adult, and I trust your judgment when it comes to our child. And if I'm busy and I can't, then if you want to call your parents, or I'll call my mom, or, you know what I mean? Like, does she want to go spend the night at grandma's house? You know, when we all lived in the same area. And because it's about your kids, you know, it's not about you or them, what they're doing, how you feel about what they're doing, and cast all that stupidity aside, because here, I got to spend, you know, however many times that her mom had something come up where I saw it as a gift because I got to spend more time with my daughter. You know, I got to do more with my daughter. Not that, we had a real set schedule. My daughters always came and gone as she kind of pleased, but I was aware enough of the fact that there is a vast majority of men in this country who do not get the time that they want with their kids. And any chance that I got was able to spend with my daughter above what I already was a gift. Why not take the gift? Why do you have to make them feel bad or cause this big old thing when you're being given a gift? You know, that being said, in certain situations, it may not work out. I mean, my ex and I, everything that just transpired and gone from us becoming single parents to where we are now has all been us figuring it out on the fly by ourselves, right? We don't have a custody thing with through courts that says this day, that day, this holiday, that holiday. If I don't have anything going, she can come over to my house. If she gets busy and it's her weekend, she can come over to my house. I mean, it's not that big a deal. And also, my ex had sent me a text. It was probably like early October, about every 3 months, every quarter, every 3 months. She kind of has an outline of everything that they got going for the next 3 months. These weekends, these trips, can we adjust this? Can we adjust that? And mostly we have a schedule that kind of loosely revolves around his son, so that when they have the kids, they have both kids. Next weekend, they have no kids. But other than that, it's kind of my daughter comes and goes as she pleases. But we live, 6 blocks away from each other. It's not like a 3-hour drive if she wants to stay the night at dad's house. And she's a little more organized, planning wise. They do a lot more than I do. I don't do a lot of planning, but I also don't do a lot of traveling. And she'd sent me a text. She was like, "Hey, we don't have anything big going on for Christmas this year. Do you want to take Adeline to Arizona and spend Christmas at your mom's? If that's something you can work out, if your mom's willing, let me know. And I'll help you try to find the flights and this and that, And so like, this is how we work things out, schedule wise and stuff like that. If my daughter has the opportunity to go on a road trip with my ex's parents for 3 weeks in the summertime, then great, go. Hopefully I'm around a lot longer than they're going to be, because they're the grandparents. Soak up the time, do some traveling, see the country. I don't mind missing a little bit of time here and there now, because I get to see her as much as I want all year long. And so when you can start getting out of that mindset of the double standards, or the I feel betrayed, or you're making me look bad, or I need to pick at you because you have a life and I don't have a life, or you're a bad parent because it's your weekend and something came up and you want to go to the Derby or go to a concert, or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not threatened by her parents wanting to take her for a trip. She's not threatened by me being able to take her to Christmas to Arizona and stuff like that. Once you can get out of your own way and, just be a parent and, spend the time with your kids rather than find things to poke the other person about or feel like they're doing it to you. You know what I mean?
Yes. And it's awesome when you have two parents, because it does take two, it takes both, to
Right.
be able
Right.
to have that type of co-parenting relationship that you were just describing, that you're experiencing. And
Mm-hmm.
I will say, for those who are listening, if one of the parents are not willing to kind of create your own flow of how you're going to parent your child together, then that's where seeking a third party can be very effective, especially during those initial periods or years where the emotions are still in control. And
Right.
speaking specifically about mediation, so for those who don't know, I'm also a mediator, and I mediate cases that involve families and divorces or child support and parenting time. And if if the two of you cannot come together on your own to create a working and mutually agreed upon schedule and methods of how you're going to communicate about, if your child needs to, if you're going to be busy and you would like to see if your partner or your ex is available, if you're not able to do that just between the two of you, then please seek out mediation. You don't have to have a lawyer, you don't have to go to court. Everything does not have to be connected to the court system. And I'm saying that because a lot of people do not know that mediation is an option where they can go and find a mediator privately and choose to do mediation without being attached to courts. And a lot of my mediation, it's primarily private clients where they're not involved in a court system at all. They just want to have a neutral party, I, the mediator, and to help them come to some sort of mutual agreement with whatever the situation is. So seek and look into finding a mediator, find one that you both agree upon, and try that as an option, because you do have options. That's another thing that a lot of parents don't know. They have options. They don't have to just be in this what feels like a terrible situation, a situation where it's like, oh my gosh, it's ruining my life, it's ruining everything, I can't get a moment of just peace or calmness or whatever. No, you do have options out there, and I would definitely suggest to research and find a mediator. Feel free to reach out to me. I offer complimentary consultations if you just kind of need to know a little bit more about mediation. A lot of people don't know about it. So I'm putting that offer out there for anyone who's listening and you're connecting to all of the information that JP and I are sharing today. And you're kind of in one of those situations where you're saying to yourself, I wish I had that type of relationship, that co-parenting relationship that JP was just describing. Well, you can. And so reach out to your resources that are available to you, and you can start with me. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, because it's important for parents and especially dads to hear that, hey, it is possible to have a working, respectful and respectable co-parenting relationship. As you were describing how you and your ex kind of go through the motions throughout the year whenever you both have your daughter, or looking ahead to figure out the schedule for your daughter. A lot of it is respect and just, like you said, the communication piece. I also made
Right.
another note. It's also about appreciation.
Right.
The appreciation piece is there as well, because that comes across when, if you have to call your ex and say, hey, I'm going out here for this weekend. Before I call a babysitter, just wanted to see if you're available. What is your schedule like? What's your time like? Would you, like to have kind of like first right of refusal? That's my real estate
Right.
hat coming, of spending that time with our daughter. And that just shows respect and appreciation that you both have
Right.
for each other. And to get there, you have to get beyond the emotions and the fighting and the trauma, and you have to accept
Right.
that the relationship, the way that it initially was, is no longer there, but you create a new relationship. You create a new co-parenting relationship, and be able to move on in such a healthy way. Yeah, teamwork and partnership
Right.
is basically what it's about.
Right. Right. And I mean, yeah, essentially. I mean, how many stories have you heard where somebody, especially if you work with a lot of dads and stuff like that, where They find out that the mom had a babysitter, or the kids was, they hadn't seen their kids in 3 weeks, and find out that 2 of those 3 weekends the kids were spending both days with the babysitter because the mom was at work.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And he didn't even have the option. And so then you have somebody else raising your kids, spending your time, not that they're always available or that they don't have stuff going on, but they, given the opportunity, most people may shift their schedule around or make adjustments in what they have going to spend more time, especially if as a dad, but working with men and just knowing that how the system is set up, there's a lot of things in my co-parenting relationship and journey that I didn't have, that I lucked out on. It wasn't, I've never been set to a schedule where I only saw my daughter 5 or 6 days out of the entire month. That has not been a part of my single father journey, but that is the reality for the majority of single fathers. You get every other weekend and maybe 1 or 2 Thursdays leading into those weekends or something. You know what I mean? You get 6-8 days total a month with your kids. And in that time, that's also when you're, so you go from having your kids every day when you're married, and then now all of a sudden you get to see your kids 5, 6, maybe 10 days a month. But also that is when your family gets to spend time with their grandkids as well. So you're trying to, your side of the family, say, and not in all cases, but a lot of times the moms will hire a babysitter before they'll call the dad's mom or grandma and grandpa on that side. Because when you split ties with the whole family, right? Not always, but a lot of times. And so now dad's side of the family is trying to cram, their normal 30 days worth of time into 10 days. But, also you got to split it with grandma and grandpa. But then when word gets back to mom that they spent the weekend at grandma and grandpa's instead of dad, then mom may call dad and be like, well, if you're not going to spend the time with the kids, then maybe you shouldn't have them at all. Maybe you shouldn't have them that much or something like that, when really they still deserve to spend time with grandma and grandpa on that side, And so it's, you feel bad. I feel bad for a lot of guys in their situations because they don't have the, I have a lot of gratitude and I feel very lucky, but I feel really bad for the guys who want more time with their kids and want to be good fathers and are limited, whether it be by the court system, the mothers, a combination of both, whatever the case may be, rather than, on the merits of what kind of father they are. Their time is connected to how the divorce came about. You know what I mean? Which, there's a lot of things that, maybe need to be changed with the system, but it's not like, the statistics of fatherless children and the outcome of fatherless children, are pretty mind blowing. You see some of these statistics of kids being raised without their fathers. And I know that you get a lot of pushback from some saying, well, I remarried, they had a stepdad. Well, yes, but no, that man has all of the responsibility with none of the authority, because you're not my real dad is still going to be thrown in their face at some point in time. Right. And so even knowing that the mom probably got remarried, it's still being raised by a single mother, because that guy rarely is given the authority of what their father's authority would have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm writing that down, what you said, because it's a feeling that's expressed quite
Mm-hmm.
often from the stepdad, where the stepdad has the responsibility but not the authority.
Right.
And
And
yeah.
it is. But I I'm single. You know what I mean? I've dated, been in a couple relationships. I started, late in comparative terms when I about having children, right? I was 32, 33 years old when I had my daughter. So even now, when she's 9 years old, if I go to the soccer games, the dance recitals, these things and those things, most of the other parents are 10 years younger than I am, you know? So people my age that I'm dating are either soon to be empty nesters, kids are in high school, quite a bit older. So it's a little bit different, but uh, in my ex's situation, I'm a super involved dad. And so like I will get the text from my ex saying, you need to have a talk with your daughter. And so like I'm still present. He doesn't need to be an authority because I'm here, you know what I mean? But being if his parenting style wasn't similar to my ex's and I was not in the picture, she's not going to abide by his parenting style with her daughter because it's not your child. I'll raise my child how I want to raise my child. So, they're in a position, guys coming into dating single mothers, you're in a position where you're responsible financially, you're responsible to be a provider and all of these things, but you don't have the authority to, raise the kids like your own kids. That's not for, saying there aren't special circumstances where, the stepdad has raised a kid and the kid has turned out wonderful and they look at the stepdad like it's their dad because their dad wasn't present in their life or anything like that. But for the most part, in today's world, you're not going to have the authority. And so then the kids are, yeah, but, same as anybody other kid that doesn't have their father in their life. The statistics are overwhelming for the importance of allowing the fathers to be involved in the children's lives, and I don't think 8 to 10 days a month is enough to offset those statistics, especially, the statistics in our country. 85% of the prisoners in the United States prison system were all raised in fatherless homes. And that's, obviously not all of those fathers, there are cases, there's, I don't know what the percentage of divorces where the father just takes off and wants nothing to do with his old wife. You know what I mean? This is, those fractional statistics within that, who knows? But, whether you want to be an involved father or not be an involved father, if you're a father, you need to be a father because statistically, your children are at a huge disadvantage if you're not there.
Right. And to create that, it's going to take maturity from both people. It's going to take understanding from both people. It's going to take the willingness to be flexible from both people, and both people understanding that the child is the priority.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible. It can happen. It happens every day.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone who is not experiencing that type of healthy co-parenting relationship, reach out. Reach out for
Right.
support, find resources, see what options you have available to you. And a lot of times it can be resolved outside of court, and you just may need a third person, a third party to be there to kind of help facilitate the conversation to kind of help facilitate those steps or the guidelines, or creating an initial plan for you both, and maybe just some therapy individually, to deal with the situations, the trauma that may have happened within the relationship when you were together. A lot of the animosity and division that is between parents is due to unsettled feelings.
Right.
And I hate to say it's that simple, but it really, that is for most, that is the root
Right.
of the issue.
Mm-hmm. Right. It is. It is. Once you can, once you leave your own pity party and stop feeling sorry for yourself, then you look at everything different. You know what I mean? If you still feel hurt or betrayed, or you're mad at the other person, and they call you and say, something came up, I know it's not your night, but do you want the kid, our daughter? Well, if I'm still living in my pity party, feeling sorry for myself, like, if I can't have fun, you're not having fun. No, I'm busy. You deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Rather than be like, yeah, I'm not doing anything. Drop her off. I'd love to, we'll sit around and play Princess Monopoly or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, but if you're still in that space of, my feelings are hurt, I'm not going out of my way to help you. Well, take you and them out of it. You have an opportunity to spend more time with your child. So
Absolutely.
What's your priorities? You know what I mean? You're choosing to be emotional and try to hurt them, rather than accept the gift of, I get to spend more time with my kids. You know what I mean? I get to spend more time as a parent. So you're making the choice right there. You're choosing your misery or feelings, or to try to hurt somebody, or to be an inconvenience to them, over your kids. Which, if you put it out like that, most people are gonna be like, well, I wouldn't choose anything over my kids. Well, you are. Right. But I mean, unless somebody brings it to your attention or says that, most people wouldn't even think about it that way.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm going to use that as a perfect opportunity for me to plug my
Mm-hmm.
coaching product. So a lot of the things that we were talking about today, as far as like self-control and effective communication with your partner, specifically being able to co-parent, managing your time, managing your schedule. And the most important piece, which is where everything starts, is the awareness piece, self-awareness, and being able to identify what is it that's holding you back from releasing the pain, the resentment, the anger, the feelings of lack of loyalty, all of that type of stuff. Well, this is a self-paced audio coaching program that I created for people that we are talking about today, for those who are in these types of situations. And it's called What's Your Passcode? Keys to Hacking Access to the Life of Your Dreams. And the first step that I discuss, because it is the most important step, is self-awareness. And like you were just saying, some people, they just don't know unless someone else points it out to them. They don't know. And like you said, hearing it that way, oh, well, you are actually putting this above your kids. And someone may say,
Right.
no, I'm not. I would never put anything else before my kids. Well, you are. And let me explain. Or here's an example. And then now that kind of opens their mind of, I never thought about that. You're right. I didn't see it that way, because I was worried about myself, my feelings, me feeling as though I need to get back or create justice or whatever. So for those of you who do not know about this product, this again is a self-paced coaching program that will walk you through ultimately everything that JP and I were discussing today. And again, it's called What's Your Passcode? Keys to Hacking Access to the Life of Your Dreams. And if you want that type of co-parenting relationship that JP and I have been talking about today, or if you want to just get it as a gift, Maybe get it as a gift to for your partner, for your ex, and say, "Hey, check this out," or do it together. I don't care how you get it, just make sure you get it. If you check in the description of this particular video, if you're watching it here on YouTube, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, there is a link in the description and there is a discount code. That discount code is a limited time offer, so be sure that you take advantage of that offer today. So that right there is it goes deep into walking you through the individual steps in order to just ultimately become the best version of yourself. So, yeah, I had to get that in.
Right. Sounds wonderful.
Awesome, awesome. So, I think it's actually a good time to go ahead and let's convert over to my
Perfect.
fun segment. Are you down?
Yep.
Awesome. Alrighty. So basically, this is where I am going to ask you a few questions that have nothing to do with co-parenting, nothing to do with what we discussed today, because these are just some fun questions. They're out of the box.
Right.
I want you to just have fun when you answer them. And so my first question for you today, JP, is what is your biggest pet peeve?
Uh, I would say being around or seeing people be rude to servers,
Mm,
like in a, whether it be, a bartender, a restaurant, a ticket taker, the cashier at the grocery store, anybody that's more in the service industry kind of field. My biggest pet peeve is seeing or being around somebody who is short with them, rude with them, treats them like they work those jobs because they aren't smart enough for a different job or da, 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 da. But I was raised, my parents had a small restaurant and my mom was the waitress, my dad was the cook. And there were times, obviously I didn't have a choice. I'd worked there all through my childhood and high school. But there was times where I ran into people who didn't know that I was the son of the owners, bringing them their drinks and this and that, and would treat me a certain way or treat my mom a certain way, not knowing that she was also the owner of the place, or saying something about the cook, even knowing he's the owner of the place. You know what I mean? And so, I maybe it's, it shows a sort of character of people. If you want to know how people really interact, pay attention to how they act towards waitresses and bartenders, how they act in the grocery store line and these things, because you don't know who anybody is.
that's right. I think that one it's probably on a lot of people's list. Yeah, there's no reason to be rude ever to anyone.
Right.
And
Right.
especially if it's stemming from looking down on a person because of their
Right.
position or what they're doing. Yeah, move on. All
Yeah.
right. Oh, next question. Next question. Okay, so I know that we're still in Q1 of 2024, but what is your favorite item that you have bought so far this year? Random, anything.
Um, Probably I don't buy a lot of stuff because I just don't. The material stuff isn't really all that huge to me. But when we went to Arizona for Christmas, um, I bought a shirt from the Grand Canyon because we went and visited the Grand Canyon. And then part of that trip, we stopped on Route 66, and me and my daughter did the photo booth. And so probably the pictures from the photo booth.
Nice. All right. Next question. What fashion trend would you bring back today?
Wearing actual clothes to places. You know what I mean? Like I wearing actual clothes, but also clothes that fit. You know what I mean? Like um I still dress the same that I have my entire life. Like my jeans fit, my shirts fit, my sweatshirts fit. If you're going to work out, like that's one thing, but living in yoga pants or living in pajama pants and when you go somewhere to the store or to town, stuff like that, and people are wearing pajama pants and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're just kind of like, get some motivation. You know what I mean? Like you're better than that. You know what I mean? Like I don't. It's just one of those things that I just But other than that, just wearing nice, clean clothes. I mean, it seems to be that in a lot of areas of the world, people are just dressing more for attention than functionality.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, goodness. All right, last question. What is one fun fact about you or anything you happen to know?
Oh, fun fact.
Or just something fun about you?
My grandfather, I was raised uh, in a place where we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and my grandpa was one of the last government trappers for the United States. And so that was he was a government trapper. Like that was his job. And so he was one of the last ones to retire, and there are no more of them in the country.
Okay.
Trapper meaning like so he had a certain area of the state that if the ranchers, farmers were having problems with, coyotes, or skunks, possums, things that were going after either their livestock or agriculture or stuff like that, then he would run a trap line and do like the old time frontier days, make a scent to bring the coyotes in, and then they would get caught in the trap
Okay.
and then disposed of for, you know, either going after people's cattle or chickens or da, 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 da. And also like uh he would get called into, in town, say if there was a skunk running around the neighborhood, then he'd have to lay out a bunch of live traps and do all that stuff to get rid of it. So
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Okay. Very interesting. And that was you said your grandfather was the last one.
right. He was one of the last ones. When he retired, I think there might have been like there was probably less than 3 or 4 in the entire country that were still doing that job or getting ready to retire themselves because they were phasing out the need for it. Now the Forest Service has damage control and that kind of stuff. But at the time, during the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was still, it was its own sort of division, I guess,
Yeah.
rather than just being a part of the Forest Service or the BLM.
Interesting. I'm glad you shared that.
Mm-hmm.
Good deal. Well, we do appreciate you entertaining us during that little fun segment. And we are going to start closing out from this discussion that we've been having. I had no idea we've we've talked this long. I just looked at my timer. Wow, but it's been good. And it's been
Mm-hmm.
interesting and intriguing. So I cannot wait to watch the replay. But before we finally close out of our discussion today, sometimes we would like to give like a last takeaway or something that we thought of that we haven't said, and we want to give it as a nugget or a tip or a strategy or just words of wisdom. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to share your last takeaway for today.
My, you know, I would say try to empathize with the other person as much as possible. You know what I mean? Like, don't see their situation from your point of view. Try to see their situation from their point of view. And so, sort of like when we were talking about, taking, if something comes up for them, and asking you if you want the kids up more or on their night or whatever. From your point of view, yeah, they want to dump off the kids and go run amok, go out, and go on a date, or whatever the case may be. When, if you can empathize and be like, they have an opportunity to go see something that may not come around for a couple more years, or go to this show. Or maybe even, so what if they're going on a date? You know what I mean? Maybe that person is a really good person and it's a really good suitor for them and they can be happy. Like, if you can empathize and be okay with that sort of a scenario, they're more likely to do the same in return and not throw wrenches in your, relationships or anything like that. And so empathy is a big tool if you choose to use it.
Absolutely. And it's needed, it's necessary. We're all trying to figure this thing called life out.
Right.
And for most of us, we're doing the best that we can. And empathy and understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll add in there patience, that
Right.
can go a long way, especially as co-parents who are trying to come together and raise and raise their child in as best
Right.
of a healthy environment as possible. Awesome.
And patience is big. If you tend to get triggered or make snap judgments and are impulsive with reactions and, running before you walk or speaking before you think, then have some patience, slow it down. If it's, there's something to be said about civility and knowing your communication styles and what you need to make things work. If you're prone to having reactions talking on the phone, then maybe you need to do most of your communication through text message so that you can take a step back and take a few extra pauses and a few breaths and group your thoughts together and what you're trying to say before you just explode a bunch of information or explode a bunch of feelings all over that person when 10 more minutes down the road you can't take it back, but you don't even agree with what you said.
Yeah. And the regret starts to set in, and then it causes the other parent to not want to do favors or to not want to be as
Right.
agreeable on certain things, and it just it just creates a mess.
Right. And
Yeah.
if you can just slow it down, have some patience, and get out of your own way, without getting taken advantage of or taken for a ride, you know what I mean? The more giving and forgiving that you can be, the more they're going to give it in return.
Yes.
And so, you can either be two people throwing gas on a fire of, conflict and escalation, or you can be two people that are generating more peace and compassion by giving more peace and compassion and understanding. And then little by little, it's just an easy place to be in because nothing's a fight. You don't have to argue to get your way because the other person understands that, you may need that at that point in time, like it's not it. If my daughter's mom calls me up and is like, you know what, I'm at my wit's end. I need a break. I know that you just had her all this last week, but I just it's probably nothing to do with my daughter, but if she's got stress triggers going on all throughout every other aspect of her life, I can, if I no big deal, drop her off. I'll come pick her up. I mean, it's not that big deal. It's not my job to add to it and make you feel worse, or, because there are times where I'm stressed out, or, I got certain things to do in my day job life, and maybe I got to work through an entire weekend, and, it's my weekend with my daughter. Hey, I got to work this weekend. Can we switch to next weekend? Do you got anything going on? Is it a big deal if you keep her? I'll come pick her up after work. Can I drop her off on my way to work and pick her up when I'm getting off work? Is that cool? You know what I mean? And most of the time it's no problem. Oh yeah, no big deal. But you have to generate that space and be conscious enough to work towards a space like that. Because if you want to go back and forth, pointing out every person, the other person's flaws all the time, nobody's going to do a favor for anybody else. They're not going to be understanding to help you, or, maybe even change their schedule or change what their plans are a little bit to make things convenient for you. If you're not in that kind of place, then you call and you're like, hey, I got to work this entire weekend. Well, you better find a babysitter. You know what I mean? And then, like, what's the point in even going to work? Because you're just going to pay the babysitter in order to work.
Right.
You know what I
You're
mean?
paying out the same money. Right.
Right. And so the more conscious effort and understanding you can bring into every situation, the more that you're going to get it in return, But if you don't have empathy and you're closed off, or you don't have patience for the other person, or any of those things, then they're not going to have any of those things for you. And at some point, we all need it.
Yep. We all need it. That's another great takeaway right there. We all will need it at some point, because life isn't going to always run perfectly off of how you may have it scheduled or how you may have it planned. And so you may not think you will need a favor from your ex in this moment of the
Right.
chaos, but
Right.
you will need it eventually at some point. It's very possible. I'll say that. It's very
Right.
possible that you'll need it at some point down the line. And to have that type of give and take, you both have to be willing to give.
Right.
Give peace, give understanding, give support.
Right. Right.
So many takeaways right there, JP. Oh, if I don't stop us, we're gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, if we have to, we will come back and do a part two. But I am going to let us just pause it there. A lot of good information has been shared. And
Mm-hmm.
for those who may want to connect with you, because someone resonates with you and your story
Right.
and your experience. So I want to give you the opportunity to just share how someone can reach out to you if they want you to help them.
Through Instagram is pretty much the easiest way to get a hold of me, and it's just my name missing the A. Social media is not my favorite kind of thing. So, if somebody has specific questions or want to get a hold of me or needs advice or seeks anything, that's the best place. You can just DM me on Instagram, and I'll do my best to either get back to you or give you an objective view, or maybe point you in the right direction if there's a resource that I know of that could help.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna have it at the bottom of your window, but go ahead and spell out your Instagram for those who may be listening on a podcast.
JP MRSH.
Awesome. JPMRSH, no A, JP Marsh. Awesome.
Hmm.
And for anyone else who, if someone doesn't have social media, they may not have Instagram, comment below. Comment below under this YouTube video if you're watching it on YouTube, or comment below on your whatever you're listening to as far as your podcast, whether it be Spotify, Google, Apple, you name it. Well, JP, I thank you for this conversation. I thank you for opening and just being open and sharing your experiences and the things that you've learned along the way with our listeners, because co-parenting is such an important situation and relationship that needs to be nurtured and needs to just really have more support behind it, because it's affecting the lives of our kids ultimately.
Right.
You're the ones who are dealing with it on a much long-term basis than what we may, because as adults we will, eventually as time goes on, we know how to let go of this, or we'll get over that. For a lot of people, it's once they get into their next relationship, it's like, oh, I don't care, yeah, that was back then.
Right.
But for your kids, they still deal with it on a daily basis in their present day life. And so the co-parenting relationships are so important for people to have a guide, to have an example of. So therefore, we can no longer create damage out here to our kids, but we can start creating healing and just healthy situations overall. So once again, I thank you for your time and everything that you have shared with us. And for everyone that's listening, please make sure you reach out to JP on his Instagram. Please connect with him and follow if he shared something that you needed to hear. And make sure that you support him as well, and support this channel. Support this channel. We are here to make sure that we provide you with valuable information and actual steps and practical tips that you can take action on today. So reach out to me if you have any questions, whether you are male or female, father, mother, you're dating someone, you're in a blended relationship, it doesn't matter. Just reach out to me. I am your coach, the single parents coach, Coach Enrgy, as well as, remember, I offer mediation services. So if you may be interested in mediation, you don't know much about it, reach out to me. I'll explain that. There's no obligation to you just jumping on my calendar and having that initial conversation together. You can connect with me on my website, thesingleparentsnetwork.com, as well as on this YouTube channel and my social media channels at Coach Enrgy, or you may find me at the Single Parents Network. As always, just always remember that when you master your mind, when you master your emotions, and when you master your assignment, you can live your purpose and live on purpose. Hit that thumbs up button, make sure you subscribe, and until next time, talk soon. Bye-bye.